Good morning, everyone. This is update for August 31, 2022, day 189 of the war and of the date update. We're gonna mostly focus on what's going on Kherson bridgehead, as this is the most important development since beginning of April. We'll just do quick walks through the front line until we get to Kherson bridgehead, and then we'll do a deep dive there. So let's just quickly jump in, starting from the very north and moving in a clockwise fashion. So first of all, the situation along the state border remains more or less the same intensity of exchange of artillery fire. Now let's move to Kharkiv, front line east of Kharkiv, northeast, I guess. There was some probing attack by Russian troops in typical area along the road, directed towards Slatine. We didn't go anywhere. This is, as we mentioned many times before, low intensity attack, like small scale attacks. This is nothing major. It does look that Russian sources report that Ukrainian side is preparing to launch major attack here in the Kharkiv area. It sort of does not make sense. We might be surprised about it because, first of all, it's just a small buffer here, probably like 5 kilometers to the border. So it doesn't sort of solve any kind of problems, but it ties up Ukrainian resources here unnecessary, where they more desperately needed in other areas. So that's why we're extremely skeptical about any major Ukrainian offensive in this area. They do mention that there could be offensive here from like Balaklia, where there was Russian attempts to do attack about a month ago. That's possible. Again, the reason we skeptical about all of this is that Ukraine does not have enough resources, and not like people, not soldiers, but specifically heavy equipment, to conduct two major offensives to different areas that are quite far from each other, and you cannot sort of easily and quickly move resources between the two. So for that reason, we are skeptical. It's possible that Russian command will try to launch offensive actually in this area to basically draw resources, Ukrainian resources, from Kherson bridgehead, just to kind of try to relieve their forces on Kherson bridgehead. That's more likely. So remains to be seen, let's put it this way. Now let's move to Izyum bridgehead. Things were actually relatively quiet, exchange of artillery fire, reconnaissance action and all that, but nothing really major was happening there. Let's move now to North Donbass front line. Here things were in the northern section, north of Bakhmut, were totally quiet, except obviously as artillery fire, rocket, airstrikes, that's always there. But in terms of infantry, it's quiet. Then the only areas where the Russian troops were active is areas controlled by, well, not controlled by the front line that's manned by Wagner mercenaries. They continued several attacks. One is Bakhmut, Seladonila, Zaitsevo. The most important one is being attack against Kadema village, where they almost captured most of it. The Ukrainian troops still holding on their western outskirts of the village, but it does look that this is just a question of a day or two or three before Ukrainian forces will lose control over Kadema. There was also attack here towards Mayorsk. It's just probably destruction action here, or probing attack, let's put it this way. Let's now move to area west of Donetsk. All typical attacks in the same kind of areas. Avdiivka area, then Pisky, then another major one is Marinka, pretty much, and kind of like in the middle towards Krasnohorivka. That's pretty much standard, sort of nothing really new here in this area. Russian troops didn't gain any ground there. This is just a closer look of this area straight west, and northwest of Donetsk. The most important point is this village Pisky that was captured by Russian troops, and they're trying to develop their attack towards Prvomaiske, and they're helping from Nevetsky and then Vodine and Opetne, basically kind of go in all of this direction and create a threat to Avdiivka, but so far they were not successful. Let's look quickly at Zaporizhia front line. Things here are quiet. Again, quiet meaning there are no infantry attacks, like relatively large-scale attacks. Now let's actually finally move to Kherson bridgehead and let's see what's happening here. So just to kind of high-level overview what's going on. So Ukrainian troops were pushing Russian troops in this area, sort of south of Prvomaiske, and then straight on the road highway from Mykolaiv to Kherson. This all bogged down completely from Ukrainian perspective. So there are no major advances, but the point here, the Ukrainian troops continue to put some pressure to prevent a moving of Russian reserves, or not even reserves, but basically moving Russian troops from this section of the front line to help situation in the northern area where they have critical situation right now. So the whole big picture, Russian troops on the entire bridgehead are stretched to the maximum, and there are very clear indication of cracks showing up, especially here in the north. Here they're still holding on defensive lines, even though they were pulling troops from this the most southern sector of the front line to help sort of withstand the pressure here, like in this kind of corner between south of Prvomaiske and northeast of Posad Pokrovsky, because there's Ukrainian troops continue to put pressure here. However, the main sort of problems for Russian troops at this point, where there are developing problems, are in this northwestern section of the front line. So Ukrainian troops did not lose control of Sukhyy Stavok, and they continue holding on their position there, and it looks like they kind of trying to continue their move, and the point is to get on this road that goes from Davidiv Brid to Berislav, which we don't see it here, but basically this road, it's essentially a road to Nova Kakhovka. So they're trying to sort of kind of start rolling here, and that would be really devastating effect for the Russian defenders. And the other problem area is here, where basically Ukrainian troops tied up at least one regiment, 331st Regiment of 98th Airborne Division, and this 45th Special Forces Brigade, so they cannot go and help out where Ukrainian troops kind of attacking here, south of Davidiv Brid. So we believe there's only this 217th Regiment is being thrown here to plug the hole and stop advances of Ukrainian troops at this point, because this 126th and 205th brigades, they are, in terms of quality, they are not there. Let's put it this way. So, as we mentioned before, the sort of main backbone of Russian defenses here on the entire bridgehead are this 98th Airborne Division, this Special Forces Brigade, and 7th Airborne Division. So those one, but the 7th one is basically tied up defending this southern section of the bridgehead, and then and it's stronger than the 98th because it has 3 regiments. We don't know actually where the 3rd regiment floating around, but somewhere here. The 98th is smaller one. It has only 2 regiments. So, and then one is basically tied up and trying to relieve 45th Special Forces Brigade, which is essentially encircled. So it remains encircled. We mentioned about that it's kind of like a fire pocket they are in, and actually now it got a little bit worse. And so this is trying to kind of help them out, and this one has been pulled here to stop Ukrainian advances near Sukhyy Stavok. But we'll actually do a little bit more detailed dive. This is just a high-level situation. And then also one thing, Ukrainian command brought in 128th Brigade, which was on Zaporizhia front line. So this is one update. and we're also learning that the Ukrainian militia brigade that's from Odessa region is being also pulled in. Apparently, they helping to put pressure in this area along the highway between Mykolaiv and Kherson. So this is the situation. So let's first look at the situation. It's kind of like around Perum, like south, this corner, and Perumaiski in this kind of corner, around this kind of area. So again, Ukrainian troops trying to put pressure here, but they don't have any success. This is just kind of like keeping that 7th Airborne Division regiment of it kind of tied up in this area. This is what was on 29th, when the first day of offensive. So this is what's happening. There were Russian counterattacks that were not successful. And then situation is more or less stable. Russian command or Russian sources claim that they managed to retake these two villages, Zeleny High and Blagodatne. We don't have confirmation possible. It's situation extremely fluid, but the point is they are not able to push any further. So this is just kind of like a local success. It's really tactical successes that lead to nowhere. So essentially that actually even more ties them up, that 7 Airborne Division, in trying to sort of defend this kind of frontal area from Mykolaiv to Kherson. Now let's go actually to the northern section, where the biggest problems for the Russian side are. So this was shown on the first day of offensive. Ukrainian troops tried to create two basically pincers, right? One is the southern, and there's the northern one. Northern one was pretty much destroyed right away. Southern attack was much more successful. And then so they captured this village Sukhyy Stavok on the day one. Then we didn't have confirmation, but there was very fair assumption they were advancing toward Bruskynske. So we have now confirmation. So this is what was happening today. They captured village Kostromka, which kind of covering their flank from the south. And then they attacked village Bruskynske, captured village Bruskynske. However, that regiment from 98th Airborne Division was brought in, launched counteroffensive, managed to squeeze Ukrainian troops right outside of the village. So basically, it wasn't kind of like, that they have decisively pushed Ukrainian forces. So basically, they put all of their weight to just barely squeeze them out to secure this road, essentially. But the road is obviously not secure because it's under the fire from Ukrainian troops, so it's not usable. But at the same time, here in the south, you really almost like don't even need like formal roads. You can go anywhere because everything is flat, and it's like terrain is. You can drive anywhere without any problems, essentially. Kind of like a field roads there's plenty of field roads here. So this is the situation sort of at the end of the day. Russian troops are kind of like withdrawing from this bridgehead. So basically what this means, the Ukrainian troops are increasing the bridgehead. The only question, they don't have so resources here to attack, to flank, to maintain flank attack on Ukrainian troops. So the only sort of stopping force at this point is that 217, I think, regiment. And once it's being chewed up, then the road is open basically to Nova Kakhovka. The Russian troops in this area, we don't know if they're still there. We believe they probably evacuated and withdrew because essentially they would be almost encircled. And this was, as we mentioned, forced conscripts from Donetsk region. So that's in the first place why this whole attack was successful, because this whole area was manned by those low quality troops. And that's what's kind of like how it all transpired in general in this area. So the question is, big question is, does Ukrainian command has more reserves to continue putting pressure on Russian troops because they stretch to the max. The things are, it's very clear that things are cracking up for. There are cracks in Russian defenses, and they're putting up like last-ditch efforts to contain Ukrainian troops in these areas in particular. Let's go north and sort of see what's going on here. And situation, this was like the first day of the offensive. Ukrainian troops tried to attack here, were not successful, repelled. Where they were successful is kind of like south of Vysokopilya. And then they also, basically, they kind of like created fire control over this region and essentially isolated Russian troops in Olhina and Vysokopilya. So this is what's happening at this moment is Ukrainian troops advanced a little bit more south of Vysokopilya. They captured this village Arkhangelske, so the encirclement is becoming more and more real. There's still sort of Russian troops can withdraw along this railroad. They will be exposed to intense, obviously, fire from both sides, from either side of the road. Probably means heavy losses, but they still can get out technically. And this is 45th Special Forces Brigade was encircled in this area. Maybe some units from 331st Regiment, but essentially what this regiment is trying to do, they launched counteroffensive at Arkhangelske. At the end of the day, they were not successful, were repelled, because the point for the idea that they have is basically to take control basically of Arkhangelske again and kind of like move north and kind of relieve, make all of this situation from Ukraine perspective moot point. But they were not successful because there are more Ukrainian troops here than this 331st Regiment can handle. And as we mentioned, the problem that Russian troops have here, and in general, let's actually go back to this area, that the whole backbone of the Russian defenses is based on airborne units, which have high fighting spirit. But the problem that they don't have as much artillery, and it's of lower caliber. They have probably some standalone units like 152 millimeter howitzers. We sort of not aware, but pretty sure there is something there. But at the same time, they lied. Even if they have those attached standalone units, that's probably not enough, and that's not the same as you have it embedded in the unit itself. So that's what makes it easier for Ukrainian side to actually do this whole offensive, because there is not much of that heavy Russian artillery that you have in Donbass area. So here, most of the cannons and sort of the caliber is 120 millimeter mortars or 122 millimeter cannon howitzers or light howitzers that are typical for airborne units. So because of that, they cannot create the same like intensity of fire and attack Ukrainian troops, inflict as many damages on advancing Ukrainian troops. So that's why Russian command tried to bring attack helicopters, but that doesn't work because Ukrainian troops have a lot of man-held anti-aircraft rockets, so that creates also heavy losses. So they getting into very difficult situation, as you can see, and at the same time, Ukrainian command continues attacks against these bridges. So they probably and the pontoons and ferries, all of that. So they're trying to paralyze this completely, paralyzed. So essentially, this creates very difficult situation for this all Russian troops here. So there are two sort of scenarios that are possible here. On one scenario, if Ukrainian side still have enough reserves and continuing pushing, and they were close to really breaking Russian troops here. In that case, Ukrainian troops can advance to Nova Kakhovka, and basically the whole Russian front is collapsing here. And that really means that there are a lot of POWs, and basically the complete collapse and destruction of these units that are here. And then this one, probably they will have enough time to evacuate most of the 7th Airborne Division and the parts of this 20th Division from here, even if it's just simply by ferries, but whatever means that they will be able to sort of escape. So that's one sort of more favorable for Ukrainian side scenario. The second scenario is, okay, Ukrainian troops get bogged down and somehow Russian troops manage to sort of hold the ground, but they don't have enough to sort of they don't have any resources to counterattack. So this is going to be much more drawn out fight that may last another months, maybe into early October, where basically Russian troops slowly will be sort of shrinking on this bridgehead until they manage to basically evacuate this whole bridgehead. And that really means that it's going to be more or less orderly withdrawal from the bridgehead, versus in scenario A, or more favorable scenario for Ukrainian side, it's going to be disorderly withdrawal from bridgehead, and basically Russian troops will lose a lot of equipment and, most important, morale. That's what is so far this is what this whole fight is about morale on both sides, and that's why we mentioned yesterday, this is fight over initiative. This is not technically fight over the bridgehead, it's a fight over initiative, where if the initiative, basically Ukrainian side is testing if it can take initiative in this war into its own hands. And so far, it's very clear that on the Kherson bridgehead, it has taken initiative from the Russian command. At this point, they are totally on defensive, and they totally scrambled and totally stretched, and they on the verge of disorderly collapse here, which may not happen at the same time. The reason we say that is because we clearly see that Ukrainian troops still don't know how to attack. It's a problem that has not been really resolved. The only reason Ukrainian command and troops are able to do what they're able to do right now is because all of these Russian troops here are isolated on this bridgehead, thanks to HIMARS rockets and basically destruction of the bridges, or not destruction, but they damaged enough severely that they cannot supply Russian troops sufficiently here, and the Russian command cannot really bring more reinforcements, with exception maybe they can do some kind of like parachuting operation of another airborne division, and they may just sort of change situation for a little bit, kind of like slow down the loss of this bridgehead, but it's going to be lost anyways. So that's one factor that helps Ukrainian side. Second is that, as we mentioned before, all of these airborne units are lightly, armed in terms of heavy weapons. They essentially don't have any heavy weapons. There is no tanks and there is no 152 millimeter howitzers. Oh, they have maybe standalone some units attached, like some regimental level or battalion level, but this is not the same as what we see in Donbass region. So for these two reasons, Ukrainian side has ability to execute that, meaning not even fully execute, but even if they stop where they are, this really just going to be slow destruction of Russian forces anyways. So those two important things. So what this really means, if let's say this is going to happen in either disorderly or orderly withdrawal of Russian troops, but basically initiative here is on Ukrainian side. This also means that going forward, it doesn't mean that Ukrainian troops are able to repeat this success elsewhere on the front line in Zaporizhia or Donbass or Izyum. Well, Izyum, that's a different situation because it's also kind of bridgehead. For the simple reason that they still don't know how to attack properly. They don't have that skill, and there's no opportunity to sort of severe Russian supplies, let's say in Donbass or Zaporizhia, because there is no river there. that's being used. So again, we don't think it's a repeatable success, but for now, this will give huge boost to first of all Ukrainian troops and give self-confidence, and just will help politically to Ukrainian top to kind of have better position in the society, because there is a lot of pressure mounting on the Ukrainian political top about not being able to do anything successfully military-wise, and they feel pressure from the society. This is not just because some people say it's from the West. It's not. It's first of all coming from Ukrainian society, and they acutely feel that pressure. So this is the situation. And in terms of losses, because there were some questions, Ukrainian troops sustaining normal losses for the offensive operation, which means they are not light. But they are sort of expected and normal for the offensive. At the same time, Russian troops also sustaining heavy losses at the same time, which is also not great from a perspective that, if you on defensive, you should typically sustain relatively low losses. But because of all of this, problems with this these conscripts from the Donetsk region that essentially opened the floodgates for Ukrainian troops, and then blockage of that 45th Special Forces Brigade, the Russian troops are sustaining pretty heavy losses at this moment. So that's another reason why they might not be able to kind of stem Ukrainian tide for much longer. But we'll see. Maybe they will. But regardless, we explained that the end sort of outcome of all of this, maybe it's going to be months later, but the Russian troops will be forced to leave this bridgehead unless there is some drastic, drop of some new resources or whatever, something totally new resource brought into this battle. But so far, based on where the resources are, Russian troops are the writing is on the wall. They're gonna be out of this Kherson bridgehead. In terms of economic meaning or result from liberating back this bridgehead, it means essentially nothing. The economic value of this region is pretty low. I would almost want to say close to zero. So economically, Ukraine doesn't really gain much. The only gain is that Mykolaiv, which is important center, is not going to be as much targeted by the Russian artillery, but beyond that, it's going to be still targeted by Russian rockets. So it's not gonna change really much. The only problem potentially that this may pose for the Russian side is that Ukrainian troops are going to be, going to get to this dam over the river. And remains to be seen if the Ukrainian troops will be able to establish bridgehead or do something more than that on their eastern side of the eastern bank of the river. Plus, there are pumps here near Novokakhovka, and they really big pumps that pump actually water to this artificial channels that goes to Crimea. So in that case, Ukrainian command technically can destroy those pumps and basically stop the flow of water to Crimea. This can be done even right now with HIMARS rocket attacks, but apparently those pumps are super expensive, super difficult to repair. Basically, this whole channel will be gone forever, essentially, because the cost to repair all of that is going to be astronomical. So they probably trying not to destroy those pumps with the idea that Ukraine will be able to liberate Crimea, and then they will need to bring water back to Crimea. So that's probably the logic behind Ukrainian actions in this particular. But technically, it's possible to destroy those pumps. That's it for today. Thanks for watching, and until tomorrow, bye bye.